right, good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Veronica Civi, Deputy Director of Water and Environmental Management for the Town of Windsor. And with me tonight is Shannon Catula, Public Works Director and Town Engineer. We're here to talk about the proposed water and wastewater rate study. And with that, we'll get started. There's supposed to be sound, but we'll just go through it. So it's typical for a water and wastewater utility to conduct a rate study every 5 years, sometimes more frequently. A rate study is an opportunity to evaluate current revenues, make sure they're sufficient to meet the needs of day-to-day operations and capital improvements. So capital projects are larger dollar items and are usually related to infrastructure. For comparison, at your home, operating costs are things that you need to keep your home running day to day. For instance, electricity bills, grocery bills, things like that. A capital project would be similar to a roof replacement, something that you only do every 20 years or so. It costs a large chunk of money and it can't really be broken up. You can't really replace just portions of your roof at a time. Typically, you do a full roof replacement. In Windsor, we've established 3 values that we're keeping in mind as we approach our operations and capital projects: to be accountable, reliable, and efficient. And we're using those values to develop the goals for the rate study. And the goals for the rate study are to stabilize rates through long-term cost control, meet the town's net zero goals, and meet regulations to continue protecting water and continue producing water that is safe to drink and treated wastewater that is safe for the environment. Our last rate study was adopted in 2020. Since then, staff have been hard at work to ensure that projects were completed as committed to. Over the last 5 years, we've completed or initiated 8 water projects, including installing generators for fire and emergency resilience in the Shiloh-Myakama area, and design for new wells to bolster our water supply. And 35 wastewater projects, including critical disinfection system upgrades, which is shown in the picture on this slide. I mentioned our net zero commitment on a previous slide. In alignment with the town council's goals of achieving net zero carbon by 2030, the wastewater treatment plant has initiated a net zero program with the goal of reusing 100% of our clean recycled water, putting 100% of our biosolids to beneficial use. That's the solid waste component of our wastewater treatment process, and doing all of that with 100% clean power. And we believe that would make us one of the most sustainable, if not most sustainable wastewater treatment plants in the world. As you can see, we're very close to achieving those goals. But not only will this have an enormous impact on our carbon footprint, it's also going to lead to long-term cost control and more affordable wastewater treatment. I'll explain that on the next few slides. So in 2021, the floating solar array project was completed at the wastewater treatment plant and began generating power for the wastewater operations and public works facilities, saving the town approximately $100,000 per year. The remaining power is purchased through Sonoma Clean Power's Evergreen program, which is 100% renewable clean energy generated through other solar installations or the Calpine geysers. Windsor sends recycled water to the geysers each year, which is then used to generate clean energy. And that is all then used to power homes in Sonoma County. So it comes full circle. And the remaining power needs at the wastewater treatment plant. Recycled water is an extremely valuable resource to the community. We've worked hard to reuse as much of our wastewater as possible instead of discharging excess to Mark West Creek during the winter months. We are very close to meeting our goal to do an agreement with Sonoma Water that was formalized last summer. Through a new pipeline that was funded by Sonoma Water, Windsor began treating wastewater from Sonoma Water's airport service area in July of 2024. In exchange, Windsor has access to 300 million gallons of extra recycled water storage ponds. Every drop of water that we save and conserve for recycled water is a drop of potable water that can be used directly for potable drinking water services. And then the last component of the net zero project is biosolids. And I think this one will actually have the greatest impact on our community, both environmentally and financially. Biosolids, again, is the solid waste component of our wastewater treatment process. Up until now, we pay a contractor to come in annually. They dry out the solids and then haul them off to Sacramento, where they're used as fertilizer for non-food crops. This process is extremely costly. Currently, we pay around $1 million a year for this service, and we expect costs to grow up dramatically, approximately 40% of the new contract. By bringing our own biosolids in-house and getting control of those operations, we save the town money in the long run by having greater control of our costs, and we cut our greenhouse gas emissions at the same time by 90%, producing a super high quality product that residents can then use on their own gardens at home, on their fruit trees or vegetables. So while I'm sure all of this is very interesting, I know the main reason why you're here is to learn about the rate study recommendations. I'll describe the factors that went into developing the rate study, and then I'll hand it over to Shannon to do the proposed rates. For the water sector, operational costs covered the continued operations of existing infrastructure and facilities, such as the Russian River wells that deliver the majority of our drinking water supply, and the maintenance of water pipes that deliver clean drinking water to your homes. Some of the capital projects that we hope to fund in the next 5 years include drilling 2 new shallow wells in North Windsor, designed for aquifer storage and recovery. That's like injecting water into the ground during the winter months and then being able to pull that water back out during the summer months. And then adding a treatment system to the existing Isposti Park well in order to produce potable drinking water. These projects are important to the Windsor community for several reasons, primarily to bolster our water supply, increase pressure from droughts, although we have had a wet year and the next drought we know is just around the corner, and projected near future shortfalls make these well projects an important component to securing increased supply and reliability. These projects are also important for emergency preparedness. Currently, Windsor's only source of water is from the Russian River. This makes us extremely vulnerable in an instance where the Russian River were to become contaminated and not suitable for potable use. Another example of the town's vulnerability is related to natural disasters. If there were an earthquake, for example, and the water lines were to become damaged out at the Russian River wells, we would have no way to deliver clean drinking water to our residents. So having an alternative water supply is extremely important for emergency preparedness. Other critical projects we plan on funding include a corrosion control system to produce the town's water delivery system and final water quality, and much needed main and service line replacement in the Wild Oak subdivision. As you can see, a rough overview of how our dollars allocated in the water utility are spent are on this slide, and the bulk of our funds are dedicated to operations and capital projects. On the wastewater side, we have similar needs to maintain important wastewater system infrastructure that helps us produce clean, tertiary treated, recycled water that is used to irrigate residential lawns and vintage greens in many vineyards and parks around town and the golf course. There are 2 major projects that are essential to the wastewater treatment plant. The secondary process system in Windsor is decades old and quickly reaching the end of its useful life. This project will replace systems before they fail and allow us to continue to meet stringent water quality standards, protect our environment, and continue producing high-quality recycled water to be prepared to manage growth projections from the 2040 general plan. And I already mentioned the biosolids project previously. By constructing our own biosolids handling facility, we're able to respond to increasing market limitations from political and environmental factors, and additionally will gain greater cost control over those quickly escalating costs. And similar to the dollar spending, you can see that the majority of our wastewater costs are attributed to maintaining, operating existing facilities and investing in capital projects that are critical to keeping our wastewater plant running reliably. So These projects require significant investment. However, deferral would have dire consequences. Beyond the compelling reasons that I mentioned for emergency resilience and diversification of our water supply, every year that these projects are delayed results in approximately a $5 million increase in project costs just from inflation alone. And this would quickly make our options for financing these projects extremely challenging, if not impossible. They also lead to long-term cost control in the end. So back to the roof example I mentioned earlier, if you invest in replacing your roof before it fails, there is a cost, but you're saving yourself an additional cost when if you deferred that maintenance and now have to repair a roof and all the damage from a leaking roof that is caused to the rest of your home. So these changes are actually saving the town money in the end by taking proactivity and doing them before they fail and cause greater damage. In order to develop a plan, we retained a rate consultant that has helped us to develop a financial strategy to accomplish our projects and some proposed rates that now I will hand over to Shannon to discuss the fun part.
Great. Great, thank you, Veronica. So the town of Windsor has three separate funds. There's the general fund, which is paid for with your taxes, and it's funding things like your roads and parks and facilities like that. And then there are two separate enterprise funds, what we call enterprise funds. There's a water fund and a wastewater fund. Each one of those funds is paid for by the rates that you pay for that service. So they're fees for service, if you will, that actually fund those two activities. In order for us to set rates, we go through a process where we take and develop a 10-year financial plan, and we look at each year, what are our capital needs, what are our operation needs, how is that cost escalating over that 10-year period, and from those cost projections, we're able to generate how much revenue do we need in each one of those years in order to fund those operations. So once we've developed that 10-year plan, we then go through a process we call cost of service, where we look at our operations and what does it cost us to pump water from A to B? What does it cost us to buy water? How does that then get, and then we look at how that is attributed to each customer class within the town. And those customer classes, for example, we have two water sources, if you will. It all comes from the Russian River, but the town of Windsor has its own wells, and then we purchase water from Sonoma Water through the Santa Rosa Aqueduct. And the cost for Windsor's water from the Windsor wells on the Russian River is much less expensive than the water that we purchase from Sonoma Water. And when you are, for example, a customer who is in the high water use tier, our tier 3 customers who are consuming more than 17,000 gallons a month, every gallon you consume after 17,000 is paid for at that highest tier rate. And that is at a rate at the rate that we purchase water from Sonoma Water. So when you're in that high use tier of customers, you're paying for the most expensive water. And that's just one example of how we go through and attribute different costs of operating our systems to different customer classes, depending on how they use the service, whether it's water or wastewater. The processes that we go through are governed by a California state constitutional amendment called Proposition 218, in addition to quite a bit of case law that has come about over the years in order to establish how a water utility or a wastewater utility charges and does a rate study associated with this cost of service and providing that service to the community. And so we've gone through those. That's why we hired Mark Hildebrand that Veronica mentioned earlier. He's an outside consultant that does an objective analysis for us, develops the rate models and studies that we use then to make these projections, and then to identify how we do that cost of service, and then ultimately roll that into how each rate for each customer class is developed. So that is the rate study. This table is what we call the bill impacts table. And it is looking at how specific customers would be impacted in the first year of the rate study. And if you look at the first row in blue, you'll see that those are what we call our low water use customers. And so someone who is a residential user who has a 3/4 inch meter, which is typical for our residential customers, if they're using the second column there, they're using 4,000 gallons in a month. And then they're also using 2,000 gallons of wastewater. You go all the way to the right, you'll see that, in the middle, highlighted in blue, you'll see what they pay today. That customer pays $85.93 today. And if you go all the way then to the next column, almost all the way to the right, under the rate study that we're proposing, the rates that we're proposing, those customers would pay $93.86 for a difference of $7.93 for those low water use customers. The next customer class we've highlighted there in yellow is what we consider the average customer in Windsor for a residential customer. And again, this particular customer is using 6,100 gallons of water, 3,300 gallons of wastewater. And then in today's rates, they're paying $120.85 for water and wastewater services. And under the proposed rate study, they would pay $132.92, which is an increase of $12.06. And so we developed this table so that you can see how various customers will be impacted by the rate increases. And if you look down, there are various customer classes. Not everyone is represented here. You may be in the middle of some of these classes. There's commercial, there's multifamily, et cetera, irrigation customers and things of that nature. And so we provide this to try and give a frame of reference for how people will be impacted by the rate increases. And you may be wondering, so this is how this impacts us. How does Windsor, there we go. How does Windsor compare to other water and wastewater agencies in the region? And that's what this table represents. And so what you can see is that Windsor is down at the bottom there. Windsor currently is very much at the bottom of the list. And then one step up from that is after the first year's rate increases are in place, that's where Windsor would fall compared to these other agencies, recognizing that these other agencies are also doing, many of these are also doing rate increases this year as well. Let me see where we're at here. So I did want to point out on this slide, this is developed based on pretty much that average customer that I mentioned earlier. So it's actually 6,000 gallons of water use and 3,000 gallons of wastewater use in their respective communities. And as we said earlier, this is it's a 5-year rate study. And so this again reflects the current rates and then the year 1 rates. And we're expecting each one of these agencies really to do rate increases over that same 5-year period as well. And we don't know exactly what those are going to be, so they're not reflected in this table. This is the summary of the proposed rate increases. And if you look all the way on the right-hand side, so the combined water and wastewater bill impact for each year is shown here. So in year 1, it's a 10% increase. In year 2, it's a 9.5% increase. In year 3 and 4, it's 9.6%. And in year 5, it is 4.3%. And you notice that it's tapering. And one of the things that we have really strived to do in this rate study and with the capital program that we're putting together is to make these investments so that in the long run, we make these investments now, it improves our operational efficiency, it improves our costs, and we actually are able to taper these rate studies going forward. So when I mentioned earlier that we did a 10-year plan for this, to develop these rates and these projections of cost, we actually show that we're tapering down to much closer to the inflationary increases year over year, rather than these larger rate increases that you're seeing here. And we are able to do that because we do ultimately, by making these investments, we see cost savings in the operating and capital improvements going forward. This is a copy of a sample bill. And one of the issues that we have seen multiple times when we've talked with folks is people look at their bill, and they say, I'm receiving a wastewater bill every month, and it's the same, and it doesn't, no matter how less water I use, it doesn't go down. I keep paying the same amount. And as you see on this particular sheet, I'm gonna go point to it, but it says Windsor Residential WA, $71.23. That is your winter average bill for wastewater services. The way that is developed in Windsor is, well, I'll say in the industry, we don't measure your wastewater production from your home because of all the solids and contaminants that are in a wastewater stream. It's very ineffective to try to measure how much wastewater flow is in that context from a business or from a residence. And so what we do is we have this winter average process where we take the lowest water use from the lowest water use from 3 months in the winter period from December through March. We take the lowest 3 months and average them together. And then starting that next July, that's what we charge you for your wastewater use during that time period. Now, if you use less than that volume of average consumption, we charge you that lower volume. So we're not charging you, it doesn't set it, it sets a maximum or a cap on your cost for wastewater services. And so we'll charge you what you actually use in those months if you use less water so that you're not paying extra. In this particular example, the customer is paying for $71.23 of wastewater services. And what that means is that their winter average worked out to be 3,371 gallons. Again, the average of those 3 months. And they're paying the current rate, which is 2.113 cents per gallon of wastewater that they're consuming. The reason we do that winter average is because that's when we expect you're not irrigating outside, and then all that water use you're doing is going inside. However you're using that water in your house, it goes down the drain, and that's why we use that type of time period. And with that, I will turn it over to Veronica to finish up.
So that was a lot of information that we just presented, and there'll be opportunity for questions at the end. But I wanted to provide you with an update on how we plan on educating the public on the proposed rate increases so that we can make sure that all of the Windsor community is aware of the proposal and has an opportunity to engage with staff on the topic. As you can see, we're holding the public information meeting here tonight, and I really appreciate your engagement. We'll also be having other meetings with other community groups. We will be doing a Spanish translated meeting identical to this one at Nuestra Comunidad at the beginning of March, and you will be receiving several email blasts through WaterSmart, social media posts. And Shannon and I are available to come speak with any group, however large or small, in any format at any location in Windsor. So we're glad to continue to spread the information to the public. In addition, we hope the community that sees the value in these the essential projects that'll be funded through these utility rates. However, we realize that there is a portion of this community that will struggle with the impact of these rate increases. In consideration of this, staff are developing a rate assistance program. There are restrictions on what type of funds can be used in this program. We are not permitted to use rate revenue to fund rate assistance programs, but we are working on a plan and hope to bring that to council on March 5th with a proposal. So this is a timeline. So the next time that we will be in front of council with rate proposals is March 5th. We'll be requesting a recommendation from council to begin the Prop 218 process, which is the formal engagement process for the rate study. And Then on May 7th will be the public hearing for final rate adoption, and if all is approved, rates would become in effect on July 1st. And with that, Shannon and I are available for any questions if you have them for us.
Let me get you on the microphone so folks online can hear you.
Hi, can you put the bill that you looked at, the sample bill back up? So this is what throws me, is I look at this and this bill, this person's used 21,000 gallons of water and their water use is $126 for this sample month, and they pay $71 for the wastewater. I currently pay $71 for my wastewater, and my water use, the charge for my water use each month is between $10 and $15. It seems like it's either a flat rate or it doesn't seem proportional to me. I'm sure legally it is, but when I saw this, it called it out.
Sure, and I think fortunately we do have the billing expert here in the back of the room. And this is an issue that I think what you're seeing is how much water did you use during that winter averaging period? And that's what sets your cost for the rest of the year. So if you used, again, no idea what's going on in customers' houses, but if there was high water use for whatever reason during those winter months, it ultimately ends up getting reflected on this bill. And again, recognize this is this $71 reflects 3,300 gallons of actual use by this customer. I think that was my number. It was 3,371 gallons on an average use during that 4-month period for the lowest 3 months. And so that is what you're seeing on that bill. And so if you're using 3,000 gallons of water, going back to that bill impact, yes, you're seeing a very low water bill with respect to your sewer bill. And if we can go back to the table with the chart of there you go. One of the things you'll notice on this chart is that Windsor's water is very small compared to wastewater. It's also small compared to other agencies. And so that's one of the reasons that you see such a disparity between your water cost and your wastewater cost. We're very fortunate to have all well water, even water that's coming from Sonoma Water is well water. And so we don't have surface water treatment plants, which are very, very expensive to operate and maintain. But we do have to have a sewer treatment plant that is expensive and costly to maintain and operate. And if you look at that, just looking at and comparing the size of that bar for wastewater, which is the second green portion of the bar that you're seeing there. I'm sorry, the first portion being water, the second portion of lighter green being wastewater. Compare that to other agencies, and generally speaking, it's pretty equivalent. But you look at our water costs, and it is quite a bit lower than other agencies. And that's one of the reasons that your bill looks like it has that variation of water to wastewater costs, where my wastewater cost is quite a bit higher. And part of that's because your water cost is actually very low compared to other agencies, and particularly as a factor of your wastewater cost. I don't know if that answered your question. It may not be satisfactory, and I'm happy to talk about it more in detail. But it is the reason that you're seeing that is the winter average. Our water costs are relatively inexpensive. And I think that's some of the reason that you're seeing the costs that you're seeing. And Veronica,
I would just like to add that our utility billing department is very gracious and will always take the time to explain water and sewer bills to customers. And we also have a water conservation specialist on my team, Christina Goulart, and she can walk through ways that you can save water as well. I can't go through all the rebates that she offers, but there are opportunities to switch to low flow toilets, low flow shower heads if you're really trying to, especially during those winter averaging months, as Shannon mentioned, if you're really trying to tighten your belt and get that water usage low, the town is available as a resource if you're interested in trying to get as low as possible.
I would also, since we have this chart up, I would like to take this opportunity to talk about one of the things that we're doing with this rate study, and this is an illustration of it, in my opinion. If you look at that water cost, why is that water cost so low for Windsor? A big piece of that is that Windsor has internalized that cost. We're not paying somebody else to provide that service to us. We're doing it ourselves. And as part of this rate study, Veronica mentioned the biosolids project and the biosolids handling facility that we're proposing to construct. That also takes a big external cost, which right now is over 10% of the operating budget for the wastewater operation. And what that biosolids facility does is take that 10% cost and bring it completely in-house. So yes, we have to build that project and we have to pay that capital cost, but we are no longer paying that external agency that has been increasing cost 10% per year for the past 8 years. We're no longer paying that contract cost, and we're doing great stuff for the environment, but we're also avoiding an external cost, and we will actually take that operation, and instead of paying $1.4 million a year with this contract to provide that service of biosolids handling, we will take that $1.4 million and we're actually going to start generating revenue off of that. Again, we still are taking on costs because it's capital, because we got to build the facility, but we're actually going to generate revenue by selling biochar and collecting tipping fees from other agencies to actually buy and use our facility services. We're going to charge other agencies to use our services, and they're really interested in doing it because they're paying that same cost for that outside company, and they don't want to do it either. They can bring it to us less expensively and do it more from a more environmentally sound approach. What other questions can we ask? Can we answer?
What is the cost of this biosolid?
The question is, what is the cost of the biosolids handling facility?
In round numbers, it's $65 million. Yeah. And I will talk about biosolids and tell you, I will put everybody to sleep. This is an amazing opportunity for us. If you're familiar with, if you've heard in the media, the term PFAS, perfluorinated compounds that are forever chemicals that are in water and wastewater and in the environment from things like Teflon and Gore-Tex and things of that nature. The process that we'll be using actually is one of the few in the world that actually deals with that problem. And it deals with it in biosolids and removes it because it heats it up to a point that it creates biochar, which is an incredibly beneficial additive for agricultural crops. It also is carbon sequestering. It is it is used in a number of areas around the world and in a few places in California. But it is a relatively new technology that we're fortunate to be able to implement in Windsor in a very timely fashion when we are developing our biosolids program.
Has this been tested? Because it was one that they were going to do first and then it didn't test out well, so.
Yes,
So the question was, has this process been tested in the past?
Yes, so two pieces to that. Yes, but I also want to talk about what we tested before. So I think what you're referring to is that we did a pilot study at the treatment plant looking at different alternative treatment technologies. And what we did is a pilot study, and we tested that process and found that it actually was going to cost us more money and not be as effective, because once we actually got out of the engineering office and actually tested our Windsor special wastewater, that we had that it wasn't going to function the way it was initially designed. And so we avoid making a huge investment because we did a pilot study and spent some funds on piloting that process and showed that it would work, but it wasn't going to save us any cost, and it was going to be complex, and we think it would have been a maintenance hassle. And so what we are using in the treatment plant with our renovation has also been tested. It actually is a more conventional treatment process than what we had tested previously, called BNR, biological nutrient removal. And that process, again, is used in a lot of wastewater treatment plants. That's on the wastewater treatment side. The other piece is the biosolids. And so The Silicon Clean Valley has been piloting a biochar pyrolysis unit for 4 or 5 years now, somewhere in that neighborhood. And that technology they have proven it out that it's been effective. They actually took the technology with the pilot unit that they were using and purchased a more modern version of that unit. That agency did. And then there are several agencies that have built those units or 2 agencies that we're aware of that have built those units in California that have them in operation.
There are other facilities in the United States that are currently being constructed or in design right now that are steps ahead of Windsor. So we're happy to be towards the beginning of this technology, but we don't be like right at the very front. So
Yeah.
we feel like it's been vetted enough in the industry, and it seems to be the direction that many wastewater treatment plants our size are going.
And I'll say that technology has been used in Europe and in Asia very successfully. We did a partnership with the Department of Energy to come in and look at that technology as a technical assistance grant. And they have an incredible amount of expertise associated with pyrolysis as a technology with different feedstock other than municipal biosolids. And they evaluated that process and agreed that what we're getting and what we're proposing to do is absolutely correct.
Other questions from the audience?
Other questions, comments, concerns?
So my business cards are in the back. Shannon and I, as I mentioned, are available for questions immediately after this session if you'd like to
Absolutely.
continue, or, if you think of something in a day or two, feel free to reach out to us. Please, share this information with your friends, with your neighbors, and encourage them to reach out to us if they have any questions.
Absolutely. And again, our utility billing folks, I know this issue of the winter average is something that can be very confusing for customers. And so if you have questions about that, please contact us. We will try to answer them, Veronica and I ourselves, but we also have fantastic experts in our utility billing department. And they can, we don't have access to your bill, but the utility billing department does, and they can walk you through what's going on and look at what your options are and see if there's ways that they can help you. They're very friendly and super helpful. So please, if you have questions, reach out and talk to us. We'd love to, we like talking about this. If we can talk about this every day, all day, we would do it because we're very enthusiastic water and wastewater managers. So come into our world. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'll make sure we're shutting off the